Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Radha, Gopinath Radha, Gopinath Shri Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadra. Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtatara Satashi Srimad Divine Grace Abhay Chanaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Jai Nithai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 3, Chapter 3 entitled The Lord's Pastime out of Vrindavan, text number 20. Snigdha smitavalokena vachapi ushakalpaya charitrena navadenya Trena vadyena Shiniketana chatmana Snigdha smitavalokena Vacha piyusha kalpaya Charitrena navadyena Charitre nana vadyena Shiniketena chatmana Shiniketena chatmana Snigdha smitavalokena Vacha piyusha kalpaya Charitre nana vadyena Shiniketena chatmana Snigdha smitavalokena Chapiyusha kalpaya Charitrena navadyena Shiniketena chatmana
Snigdha smitavalokena Vacha piyusha kalpaya Charitrena navadyena
Shiniketena chatmana. Word for word, Snigdha, gentle, smitavalokena, by a glance, with a sweet smile. Vacha, by words. Piyusha kalpaya, compared to nectar. Charitrena, by character. Anavadyena, without flaw. Shri, fortune. Nikitena, residence. Cha, and Atmana, by his transcendental body. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: He was there in his transcendental body, the residence of the Goddess of Fortune, with his usual gentle and sweetly smiling face, his nectarian words, and his flawless character. Purport: In the previous verse, it is described that Lord Krishna, being situated in the truths of Sankhya philosophy, is detached from all kinds of matter. In the present verse, it is described that he is the residence of the Goddess of Fortune. These two things are not at all contradictory. Lord Krishna is detached from the variegatedness of the material nature, of the inferior nature, but he is in eternal blissful enjoyment of the spiritual nature, or his internal potency. One who has a poor fund of knowledge cannot understand this distinction between the external and internal potencies. In the Bhagavad Gita, the internal potency is described as the para prakriti. In the Vishnu Purana also, the internal potency of Vishnu is described as para shakti. The Lord is never detached from the association of para shakti. This para shakti and her manifestations are described in the Brahma Samhita chapter 5 text 37 as Ananda Chinmaya Rasapati Bhavithabhihi. The Lord is eternally joyful and cognizant of the taste derived from such transcendental bliss. Negation of the variegatedness of the inferior energy does not necessitate negation of the positive transcendental bliss of the spiritual world. Therefore, the Lord's gentleness, His smile, His character, and everything related to Him are all transcendental. Such manifestations of the internal potency are the reality of which the material shadow is only a temporary representation from which everyone with proper knowledge must be detached. Translation again. He was there in his transcendental body, the residence of the goddess of fortune, with his usual gentle and sweetly smiling face, his nectarian words, and his flawless character. Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dhina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarobhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Mukum Goroti Vachalam Bhangam Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Guru Tirtharanam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanyeshwaram. Hare Krishna. So, welcome to this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. We are now speaking on the section of Uddhava's talks with Vidura, and Uddhava is remembering the Dwarka pastimes of Lord Krishna. And in this particular group of verses, he's talking specifically about how Yudhishthira Maharaj performed sacrifice and how the Lord performed his Kshatriya Dharma, how he lived in strict conformity with the Vedic customs of society. So in yesterday's verse we read about how the Lord, despite having so much material opulence, spiritual opulence for enjoyment, despite the Lord being able to transgress all types of Vedic principles and conformities, he decided to still be in line with the Vedic customs that he himself put forward, simply to set an example for human society. So if you read in the section of Krishna book where it talks about Narad Muni visiting the different palaces of Lord Krishna and Krishna's daily activities, the next chapter, there Prabhupada emphasizes very specifically that Krishna enacted these pastimes and he enjoyed fully in his spiritual potency, but he acted like a normal householder simply to teach others how to act like a normal householder. So it's mentioned that the Lord would, during the Brahma Muhurta time, if you read that section, the palaces of the Lord, the situation that the Lord is in, everything is described very sweetly, and it is full of simply enjoyment for the Lord's senses. So at that particular important time in Brahma Muhurta, the parijat flowers, they will emit a fragrance that will enter into the room, the bees will go mad smelling that fragrance, and then the birds will start singing, and together it will sound like they're chanting the Vedic mantras to wake up the Lord. And the Lord will wake up, but his wives would feel complete disgust. Generally, Brahma Muhurta is considered to be a very auspicious period of time, but the wives of Krishna, specifically it's mentioned, Rukmini would despise the Brahma Muhurta because it would be a period where she would have to let go of the loving embrace of Lord Krishna. Because then Krishna would get up and then perform his daily activities, his sadhana. He would wake up, he would perform his meditation, his ritual sacrifice, taking a shower, so on and so forth. So the Lord set the example for all householders to follow. So it is not just that Krishna came and he enjoyed and he left, but he also established dharma. Parichanaya sadhunam vinashaya jaduskritam dharma samstarpanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. So in all of Krishna's activities, we can see that he has acted in such a way that dharma is upheld. Of course, when you see great personalities, it's mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam, their activities cannot be imitated. Rather, they should be followed. So, in that section of Krishna book, Prabhupada specifically mentions that yes, Krishna had 16,108 queens. So, you think if you want to enjoy like that, can you maintain all of them? So therefore you should also understand you cannot perform the activities of Krishna, the superhuman activities of Krishna. So therefore, rather than trying to imitate Lord Krishna, we should follow him. Therefore we follow the dharma of Krishna, just as the dharma Krishna established. Just as Lord Shiva drank the ocean of poison, Prabhupada says, doesn't mean that we should follow in his footsteps and also imitate him and drink poison. Rather, if we follow in the footsteps, then we are saved from that suicidal activity. So in this verse today, Uddhava is nicely contrasting the previous verse of how Krishna strictly followed dharma and how he was situated in detachment and knowledge. So it would appear to people that Krishna was like any other living entity in one sense, or he was a great personality that had to follow all the rules and regulations of material nature and dharma just to be able to become liberated from the material world. But actually for Krishna it was not the case. He chose to act in such a way, but despite choosing to act in such a way, he still was able to enjoy. And this verse specifically mentions how he was there in his transcendental body. Avajananti ma mudha manushim tanam ashitha parambhava ajanato mama bhutva maheshwaram. That Krishna says that it's the foolish people who think that my body is material. Actually, I've descended in my original transcendental body. So what does that mean? It means that he's non-different from his body. Whereas we are different from the body, we have two bodies, the subtle body and the material body. Bhumi rapam nalo vayu kammano buddhirevacha ahankara ityam me bina pakitirashtada. This is the material potency of the Lord. That energy which is separate from the Lord. That energy is just a covering for the soul. But for Krishna, he's not covered by that material energy. Therefore, Prabhupada says that this Mayavadi philosophy, that it's called Mayavad because they assume the Lord to have appeared in the world in a material body, and they also assume that we are also the Supreme Lord, which is wrong. Which means, according to their philosophy, that Maya is greater than the Lord. Because if we are the Lord, how can we forget our existence as the Lord? And how is it that we are struggling in material existence? And you'll see in one morning walk, Prabhupada will actually say one devotee will tell Prabhupada that actually it is my pastimes. They will say, the Mayavadis will say, if you ask them why you're suffering in material existence, they'll then tell you that, oh, it's part of my pastimes. And Prabhupada would get very angry. And then you say, if it's part of your pastimes, then you will be God, then I'll be the kicking God. We'll see who is the real God. So Prabhupada was very much against this philosophy, and it is rightly so, because it is a false propagation of transcendental reality. So therefore, here Uddhava is very clearly mentioning that the Lord appeared in his transcendental body. Atmana. Often we read the verse as Atma, referring to the soul, but we read there's a particular verse in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita where Prabhupada says Atma can be soul, Atma can be body, and Atma can also refer to the mind. In this context, Atma refers to the transcendental body of the Lord. So Prabhupada is very specifically hand-feeding us here, telling us that the Lord's body is transcendental. And this is very important, because if you can't understand the distinction between matter and spirit, that discrimination is required. Well, if you can't understand that, then you're simply bewildered. You're in illusion. You're in Maya. But if you're able to understand the distinction between matter and spirit and the controller of both, then you're situated in transcendental knowledge. That verse, Mahatmanastu mam partha devim prakritim ashritaha. There it's mentioned that Krishna mentions that one who has taken shelter of him, specifically his devim prakriti, that is the internal potency of the Lord, they're able to cross over material existence, whereas everyone else, no chance. Therefore Prabhupada in so many Janmashtami classes, he refers to this verse in Bhagavad Gita, that you should know the tattvata of Krishna. You should know who is Krishna. That verse, you remember that verse where Janma karma chame divyam evam yoveti tattvataha. That verse Prabhupada quotes so many times, saying that if one understands the nature of Krishna, then very easily we can go back home, back to Godhead. It's very easy once you understand the nature of Krishna. To be able to understand the nature of Krishna, you need to understand the nature of matter and the nature of spirit and the controller of both. So Prabhupada says this is the sum and substance of transcendental knowledge. In Isopanishad you'll read also that one should understand simultaneously or alongside each other the science or the knowledge of nescience and spiritual knowledge as well. Both need to be understood. So here it's mentioned specifically in the purport, Prabhupada saying that previous verse it is described that Lord Krishna, being situated in the truths of Sankhya philosophy, is detached from all kinds of matter. So we understand that, okay, Krishna is separate from matter, right? That he is aloof from matter. In fact, Krishna says there's nothing really for need. There's no real need for me to be doing anything in the material world. There's no karma for me to perform. But still later on he mentions that actually I still perform these acts just simply to set an example. Otherwise the whole world would go into ruination. So next sentence Prabhupada says, in the present verse it is described that he is the residence of the goddess of fortune. So immediately it's contradictory. One sense here he is detached, completely free from all types of enjoyment, all types of matter. And then on the other hand, Uddhava is mentioning again that he is the Nivasa or the Niketan, the residence of the goddess of fortune, Shri. So how do you understand that? Because one sense he's aloof, renounced, right? Completely free from material existence. And immediately we think if someone is free from material existence, our impersonalist knowledge or our impersonalist upbringing automatically kicks in and you think, okay, so if he's free from all of this, then he's just like nothingness, completely detached, has no enjoyment, just renounced and present within the self. Some vague spiritual philosophy we may have picked up. But no, actually, if he's away from matter, it means that he is in the spiritual nature of things. So rather than Prabhupada saying we just negate material variety, you should also understand the variegatedness of inferior energy does not mean negation of the positive spiritual energy. It just means it's a reflection of. So when you give up material variegatedness, you naturally have to accept the positive spiritual variegatedness. Because both are two sides of the same coin. They're both energies of the Lord. One is just a separated energy of the Lord, and the other one's the internal potency of the Lord that the Lord always associates with. So therefore, Him being the residence of the Goddess of Fortune means that He is detached from the variegatedness of inferior nature, but He is in eternal, blissful enjoyment of the spiritual nature or His internal potency. So that means that the Lord is always in touch with enjoyment, always in touch with the spiritual energy, and is always able to satisfy His senses. So Krishna is the supreme enjoyer, rasa vai sa, that He is the pleasure or the reservoir of all types of enjoyment, specifically loving relationships. And He's known as Akila Rasamrita Murti, that He is the embodiment of such rasa, such exchanges of love between devotee and the Lord. So Krishna is able to enjoy in that way. Prabhupada quotes in Gita, aparayam tve anyam viddime prakritim para. There, straight after explaining how the material elements of the Lord constitute His external energy, the soul is part of the internal energy of the Lord. But it is known as Tatashta Shakti, in the sense that it can choose to be under the control of Maya, or it can choose to be under the control of Krishna's internal energy, Yoga Maya. In the Vishnu Puran, Prabhupada quotes this so many times in Chaitanya Charitamrita. He says, Vishnu Shakti Para Prokta, Vishnu Shakti Para Prokta, Kshetrajna Tata Para. There he's mentioning there that Lord Vishnu has three potencies. Tritiya Shakti Rishyate. That these three potencies are composed of the external, the internal and the marginal. The Tatashta, and then you have the other two, the internal and external. And that these three energies of the Lord is what the Lord interacts with. This external energy of the Lord is separate from the Lord. I was listening to Radhesham Prabhu give an overview of this particular section of this Bhagavatam canto. And there he's mentioning that earlier Uddhava was mentioning how just before, Prabhupada was mentioning just before Uddhava and Vidura met, Uddhava had just finished hearing from Krishna near Prabhas Kshetra. And the Lord was sitting next, his back towards an Ashwatha tree with one leg over the other. And he was giving Uddhava transcendental knowledge with Maitreya hearing in the background. So Radhesham Prabhu was mentioning that the Acharyas mentioned specifically this detail about the Lord having his back towards the Ashwatha tree, this banyan tree. Why was the Lord having his back to this tree? It was showing that the tree was like the tree. You know, we have here the example that in the spiritual world you have it's like the tree, and the reflection on water, that's the material world, right? So that tree represents the material world. The Lord has it on his back. So in other words, and we read earlier in the first canto that Vyasadeva, after getting instruction from Narad Muni to write Srimad Bhagavatam, he went into trance, and what did he see? He saw the Lord with his whole opulences, and specifically saw the Maya Shakti on his backside. So in other words, it was separate from him and away from him. But at the same time, it is his internal, it's part of his energies. So Radhesham Prabhu was mentioning that was the specific significance of the tree, that the tree represented that particular potency of the Lord. So it's very interesting, earlier in Bhagavatam also it's mentioned that the Lord, when he wants to create, then he'll initiate through his material energy. Just as the husband will want to enjoy with his wife, similarly the Lord will initiate that sort of creation or the Shishti potency of the Lord through his material energy. But here we're talking specifically about how the Lord's activities are spiritual. This is the main thing of today's verse. That the Lord's activities are of a spiritual nature, not material nature. Because, again, coming back to the impersonalist idea, that we think when we hear the Lord has no sort of material characteristics, no qualities, nirguna, all of these things, immediately in the mind there's the doubt that comes. So then if the Lord is free of all of these things, then that means he must be like, impersonal, nothing, just vague idea. But Prabhupada specifically emphasizes this point. That's why Prabhupada is known as Prabhupada's Pramach, Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. That is teaching us that actually Krishna is a person. And being the Supreme Person, he is able to enjoy in the spiritual nature, which means that his enjoyment is not temporary. His enjoyment is unlimited, and he's able to enjoy to the fullest, to complete capacity and much more. So Prabhupada mentions a verse here, Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Patibhavita, that the Lord is always situated along with his potencies. So the Lord is always eternally joyful and cognizant in the taste derived from such transcendental bliss. So, very simple point is that we are all individuals. The Lord is also an individual. And that relationship with the Lord means an exchange or reciprocation between the individual and the Lord. And that is known as rasa. To be able to engage in a relationship and then to get the reciprocation from the Lord is an exchange of rasa, or a mellow or a taste of a particular mood. If it's a living entity with the Lord who is of a mood of shantaras, then it's simply neutrality. That they simply recognize the Lord's great superior position and just remains there. And the example given is of those dhyana yogis. Dhyana yogis are those who are performing hatha yoga and come to the stage of samadhi and recognize or are able to see or perceive the Supreme Lord within the heart, and just simply overcome with awe and reverence of the Lord in that sense. Then if you go a step further or a bit more deeper, then the intensity of the love or praying for the Lord then becomes much more stronger, and one develops an attitude of service. That's dasyaras. And so on. You continue going and that becomes even more stronger. One becomes in one sense superior to the Lord in that relationship and exchanges rasa with the Lord in the mood of parental love. And then if you keep going further and further, then you come to the point of the Madhurya Ras, where the Lord is engaged in pastimes with his devotees in the topmost ecstasy. Ujjvala Ras is called, the topmost, the crest jewel of all loving relationships with the Lord. So these are all activities the Lord performs, but in the spiritual nature. There is no repercussion in terms of karma. If we perform such activities in the material platform, immediately we'll get some karma. In fact, any desire we have on the material platform immediately generates a new material body. So Prabhupada says material nature karma is so strong. Do not underestimate karma, because any sort of material desire we have, if we act or if we have that desire and cultivate desire, immediately the body is formed. But if we cut that desire and engage in Krishna's service, we tolerate such past activities and engage in Krishna's service, immediately Krishna destroys it. Nirdahati kintu cha bhakti bhajam. That he completely destroys that seed of karma because you're engaging in his service. So if Krishna can do that, he can destroy that seed of karma, then understand his position as being beyond material existence, beyond the laws of karma. In fact, he is the one who establishes and maintains the law of karma as Upadrishta Anumanta Cha, as the overseer and the permitter, the Paramatma within the core of the heart. If you go one step further and understand, many people will then criticize the Lord's loving pastimes with his Vrindavan associates. So then you need to understand, who are these associates of the Lord? It's mentioned that the Gopas, they went through so much pious activity, so many lifetimes of pious activity, that they are able to attain that position of being able to serve the Lord in Sakya Ras. So then, if you go to the extent of understanding the yogis, they have to give up all types of material enjoyment, all types of material attachment to be able to understand Krishna in the form of Paramatma. And they still have to go further to be able to understand the Bhagavan aspect of the Lord. So it's mentioned by Sukadeva Goswami, if you have all these great sages who are giving up material nature, giving up material attachment, giving up material desire, to be able to go towards transcendence, to be able to understand the Supreme Lord, then understand the position of the Lord. In fact, even after giving up all of these things, these yogis are not able to completely associate with the Lord completely, right? They're not able to get to the topmost platform simply by their austerities and renunciation without loving devotional service and the mercy of the devotees. So if that's the case for them, giving up material desires, they're still not able to completely approach the Lord. What do you think the Lord's position is? It will be completely beyond material existence, beyond the purview of material nature. So therefore, Sukadeva Goswami mentions that this Ras Lila of the Lord, this pastime of exchanging rasa with the gopis in the middle of the night, that is completely beyond our material conception of loving relationship between boy and girl. Because to be able to get to that situation, to associate with the Lord, one has to give up material desires. So therefore, Sukadeva Goswami concludes by saying that the Lord is beyond all of this material consideration. So here, therefore the Lord's gentleness, His smile, His character and everything related to Him are transcendental. Such manifestations of the internal potency are the reality, of which the material shadow is only, Of which the material shadow is only a temporary representation from which everyone with proper knowledge must be detached. So, again, coming back to the point in 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna mentions that the tree of material existence is just simply a perverted reflection of the original tree of the spiritual world. And to be able to cut down that tree, does anyone remember what Krishna recommends in the 15th chapter? What do we...
Weapon of knowledge.
Yeah, with the weapon of knowledge we need to cut down this tree. And it's mentioned that this particular tree is reflected on the material desires that we have. So this tree, just as a tree, reflection of a tree is reflected on water, similarly this material world is reflected on the material desire of the living entity. And Prabhupada often says so many times that the Lord is so kind. The Lord is so kind that He's satisfying your desires. You want a new material body? Take it. The Lord is so kind. And I used to think, why is Prabhupada saying so kind? You know, again, material existence, you again become dog, hog, and suffer like anything. Why is Prabhupada saying so kind? Prabhupada is saying so kind because the Supreme Lord, Krishna, He is allowing us to satisfy our independent desires. That He's not forcefully coercing us to be able to come back to the spiritual world and associate with Him. That's His kindness, because He has every right to do that. We are His marginal potency, and our duty is to serve the Lord. In fact, it's in one sense, it's 3 against 1 proportionately. 3/4 of the existence is this Nitya Siddhas, and 1/4 is the Nitya Baddhas, stuck in the material world. So yeah, He has every right to coerce us into enjoying with Him. But He knows that the full enjoyment comes when one voluntarily engages in His service, and He respects and understands the independence of every living entity. So the Lord is extremely kind and considerate, because if you think from the Lord's perspective, how many lifetimes does He has to go through watching the living entity not choose Him? Lifetime after lifetime. And on top of that, it's kind of like the Lord is waiting for the individual soul to turn to Him and engage in devotional service. But on top of that, the Lord has to facilitate the living entities turning away from Him. Because Matar Smritir Jnanam Apohanam Cha, even forgetfulness of the Lord comes from Him. So how, in one sense, from our minute or in our small insignificant understanding, how difficult would it be if we have a relationship with someone and that person completely neglects us, to the extent that we still try and approach and establish a relationship, and we have to also maintain them. We have to also maintain their nonsense activities of neglecting us. Kind of like how a rich parent would have a completely intolerable son or daughter who would be completely absorbed in enjoying their senses but wouldn't care so much about their parents. Right? But still the parent will still consider that I must maintain this child, I must take care of them out of affection, even though that they're straying away and they're not looking towards re-establishing a relationship. So the Lord, very humble mind. So the Lord, that's His position. But we shouldn't understand the Lord is displaying any type of material lamentation or distress. The Lord is completely enjoying His pastimes. He's always in His position of Ananda Chinmaya Rasa. He's always full of that bliss. But out of His concern for the living entities, He decides to come, create the material world, Himself enter the material world so many times as the Purusha avatars, and at the same time guide the living entity from within the heart. where to go, what to do. Yantarudani mayaya. So the Lord's position is like that. He is completely beyond material existence, situated in His transcendental abode, His dham. So the living entities then need to understand the nature of the Lord, the characteristics of the Lord, and how He is beyond material existence, and how to understand how to cut these material desires down with proper knowledge. So I was going to, maybe I have some time. Here if we see, Prabhupada not only gives tattva, the knowledge or the understanding of the Lord's position, but also he explains a bit of the characteristics of the Lord. His usual gentle and sweetly smiling face, His nectarian words, and His flawless character. Again, referring back to that section of Krishna book, where Prabhupada talks about the daily activities of Krishna and how Narad Muni visits the different palaces of Lord Krishna. There you'll see the Lord's interaction with His wives, the queens of Dwarka. And there you'll see that the Lord is engaged in so many different activities with His queens. In one place He's engaged with Uddhava, and He's playing chess with one of the queens. In another place He's sitting and enjoying sweet words with His family, playing with His children, performing ritual sacrifices. Then another place He's practicing the sword. And He's doing so many of these activities, but He's able to still associate with the queens, to the extent that when He leaves Dwarka and comes back, it's mentioned that, I think it's even mentioned in the first canto, when He comes back, the queens exchange with Him loving, shy glances. And to be able to, I guess, reciprocate with the Lord according to Vedic etiquette and custom, they send their sons forward, right, to get embraced by the Lord. And seeing that their sons, children being embraced by the Lord, then they'll see the Lord and they embrace the Lord from within their heart. But all the while they'll be exchanging loving glances. And the Lord will then speak nectarian words, as you'll see later on in Krishna book, where there's the loving talks between Rukmini and Lord Krishna. The Lord and His flawless character completely enchants the devotee, completely attracts the devotee, completely mesmerizes the devotee, to the extent that you'll even see the intensity of absorption that Rukmini Devi had in the Lord, that when she started hearing the Lord, not even, in one sense, when the Lord is talking very jokingly, how, you chose the wrong husband, you still have some time, you can marry Shashupal, all of these things there. For Rukmini, what hurt the most was that impending separation from the Lord. That's how much attachment she had. Although the Lord's present there, she fainted thinking that the separation was coming, was imminent. Such was the intensity of loving relationship with the Lord and the devotee on the spiritual platform. Prabhupada says in the material platform, the extent of love we can understand is the love between mother and child. But even that is limited, because the mother will only love her own child. She won't love all other children. Therefore that's material love, it's not spiritual love. But still, that intensity of affection, we can understand, using that example, we can understand the affection that the devotees have for the Lord, or the Lord has for His devotees. For a lack of understanding and realization, we need examples. So this verse specifically talks about that aspect of the Lord, that although the Lord situated in the truths of Sankhya philosophy, that He followed detachment, knowledge and the Vedic customs, still He was beyond all of that. He didn't need to follow all of those rules and regulations, but He still did to set an example, and that didn't affect His position of being completely situated in this eternal blissful enjoyment of the spiritual nature. So Uddhava is clarifying that, and it's like a precursor for the next verse, where Uddhava will start talking about the enjoyment and the relationships he had with the intimate relationships he had with his wives, the queens of Dwarka, at night time. So this is a precursor to establish the principle of Krishna, establish his position beyond material nature, so that you don't misunderstand and have doubts of Krishna's position and his activities as you continue hearing about Uddhava's ecstasy or his in separation of Lord Krishna. So I'll end here. If there are any questions or comments. Yes, Prabhu.
It's interesting, I was reading in Nectar Devotion chapter 44 about this conjugal love, and you were explaining about how, even the jivas, they neglect Krishna by turning away from him and provides facility.
Yep.
And in the conjugal love explanation of Srimati Radharani, it's explained that even she neglects Krishna, but then that heightens his love by hundreds and hundreds of times.
Yep. 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 So yeah, just by that example, if you just didn't see the other aspect and just read that section of conjugal love where the Lord is being neglected by his topmost devotee, you'll immediately think it's just a mundane material relationship between boy and girl. So yeah, to be able to understand Krishna and his spiritual activities, we need to also understand material nature. So Srimad Bhagavatam gives that. Srimad Bhagavatam gives us knowledge on how to understand material nature, the temporary nature of material existence, and how to cut free from it and attain the spiritual world. So Prabhupada would often recommend, we need to read Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, but we also can relish nectar devotion and Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita to understand the loving relationships of the Lord with his devotees. That is also required, both. Not just detachment from the material world, but attachment to the spiritual world. One will give us the taste, one will give us that strength or the anticipation, and the other one will give us the strength to let go. But thank you, Prabhu. That was a very nice point.
The highest form that we all practicing for, we read in the morning, Krishna Prema, we all stay joining with the person who's praying. And the only scripture that can give you that Krishna Prema is Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah. That's why in the beginning it's mentioned that those who are all Rasika, they'll read Srimad Bhagavatam, right? And even Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur mentions that Chaitanya Charitamrita is just simply an extension of Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay? That's it. Yeah, we just have to simply hear Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada says just simply give your ear. That's all that's required. You'll get everything. Just simply hear Srimad Bhagavatam and everything will be needed to know. Because sometimes you'll think, I need to now study about material nature and Sankhya philosophy and all the elements, and I need to focus and put effort and try to find sections of Prabhupada's books and all that sort of stuff. But actually, if you just sit down and read Srimad Bhagavatam end to end, just give time, Srimad Bhagavatam will give you everything. You just simply need to put endeavor into hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. That's all. Prabhupada will teach you everything. That's all that's required. Prabhupada will give it. Okay? Thank you so much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada